What do these two cars have in common, other than the name GTO? Very little, but both played a big part in the birth of the muscle car. Gran Turismo Omologato. 3 beautiful Italian words that changed an entire industry. For years, the name Gran Turismo Omologato was reserved for the fastest, most exotic thoroughbred racing cars. And probably the most famous Gran Turismo Omologato bore this insignia. This is Ferrari's version of the Gran Turismo Omologato. In September 1964, it was the standard by which all the other great performance cars of the world were judged. It was a magnificent automobile, no doubt about it. Nothing in the automotive world dared compare itself to this car. Nothing, that is, but a plain little Pontiac Tempest. Gran Turismo Omologato, or GTO for short. This is the 1964 Pontiac GTO. It is, by all accounts, the car that ushered in the era of the muscle car in America. That incredible time when Detroit produced the most outrageous cars to ever hit the street. Today, the GTO is one of the most collectible of all American cars. Restored 64 GTOs sell for 10 times their original sticker price. And thousands of enthusiasts have created an entire industry out of their love and desire to at last own their own little GTO. Pontiac's sales brochure on the 64 GTO called it a device for shrinking time and distance. For 1964, Pontiac had taken their sensible, economical Tempest Compact, given it a gorgeous facelift, and offered it up with their 389 cubic inch power plant in an option package they dared to call GTO. The 64 design was completely new, from the grille to the gas cap. The Tempest, the Chevy Chevelle, the Olds Cutlass, and the Buick Grand Sport were the new wave of intermediate cars from General Motors, and they were turning young people on.
What does he have that she doesn't?
Unlike the rest of the cute and sporty new breed, though, the GTO was born to be bad.
And a lot of my friends had 390 Fords, 383 Plymouths, but they were all big cars. And I was looking to buy one of those, maybe a 426 Street Wedge, something like that, in 1964. Then I saw the first ad for the Pontiac GTO. I believe it was the ad that said, "I wouldn't stand in the middle of the road if I were you. There's a Pontiac GTO coming." I just liked the idea of the mid-size car with the large engine, which was actually the first muscle car.
Back in the 50s, the fastest cars were the big cars, the ones you saw on the track every Sunday.
The race is on.
Pontiac and all the other Detroit automakers had discovered that the cars that won on Sunday sold on Monday.
But half a lap behind, coming from 46th starting position, Fireball Roberts in number 3 Pontiac.
Pontiac's factory-supported teams won more NASCAR races than anyone else in the early 60s, including both the Daytona 500 and the Firecracker 250 in 1962.
Bill Abraham from Akron, Ohio, wins the A-Stock automatic crown in a 62 Pontiac.
Pontiac was no stranger at the nation's drag strips either. Working through their network of performance dealerships around the country, Pontiac's engineering department was funneling special parts and information directly to what was in effect a factory drag team. By the end of 1962, all these racing activities had vaulted Pontiac from last place in sales among General Motors divisions to number 2 behind giant Chevrolet. But in January of 1963, General Motors announced a corporate ban on all racing activities. No more factory support for any kind of racing, either direct or through the dealers.
Two Pontiacs duel in the B Factory experimental class, with Jim Wangers, the number 926, winning it.
Jim Wangers was one of those win-on-Sunday Pontiac racers. On Monday, though, Jim was advertising executive for Pontiac Motor Division, and the pullout from racing hit him doubly hard.
With the advent of this new policy from the corporation, here was Pontiac suddenly without a stage on which to put their cars. They were suddenly deprived of this organized racing activity from which a very good backup for some aggressive advertising built around the wide track image was coming.
How do you continue to be the #1 performance car in the country when you can't go racing? Stay with us as the American muscle car continues.
The new 1963 Pontiac.
All through 1963, Pontiac had two problems to deal with. One, GM's prohibition on factory support for racing, in effect, gave away their performance image to Ford and Chrysler. Two, their little compact car, the Tempest, was fast becoming a liability rather than an asset.
The car that had bowed in 1961 as a real engineering marvel had deteriorated significantly to the point where it was a real troubled car. In 1964, when the new Tempest/Le Mans car came into the marketplace, it was felt that what we needed was not just another nice, not just another good car. What we needed was kind of what we called in the industry an oh my God.
At the time, the head of Pontiac Engineering was a pretty sharp young fellow named John DeLorean.
Now, John DeLorean, who was then at that time the chief engineer of the division, had a habit of holding what-if sessions on Saturday mornings.
That what-if created this car, the GTO. Putting the 389 in the Tempest created the world's first muscle car, and it was an instant hit with everyone. Well, almost everyone. As it happens, the GTO almost never made it into Pontiac's lineup. GM's corporate rule was engine sizes were limited to 1 cubic inch per 10 pounds of vehicle weight. Well, here's this Tempest weighing in at about 3,400 pounds wet. You see the problem.
Well, you didn't have to be a brain surgeon to figure out that a car that weighed about 34 or 3,500 pounds couldn't have anything bigger than about a 350 cubic inch V8 engine. But if the car were marketed as a Le Mans with the 326 cubic inch V8 as standard equipment, but with the optional GTO package, which carried such things as a special applique for the instrument panel and a couple of hood scoops, however not functional, a couple more of those kinds of things, and oh yes, incidentally, a 389 cubic inch engine. In effect, the muscle car era was upon us.
Slick move, huh? And the best part is, it worked. The GTO was in the showrooms. Now all Pontiac had to do was persuade the world that this car was really something special.
Pontiac is proud to announce that the editors...
Jim Wangers and the marketing people had been having a lot of fun promoting Pontiacs as win-on-Sunday race cars.
The award reads...
But the job of selling the GTO to the young people of America is one of the greatest success stories in American marketing.
See and price those wide-track Tigers by Pontiac.
Even those of us that knew quite a bit about Pontiacs really weren't told about this offering. And kind of like through the rumor mill, hey, have you heard about the GTO? The GTO, what's that? Well, it's got 421 HO heads, it's a 389, it's got tri-power, yeah, but it's in a body that weighs about 3,300 pounds. Oh, yeah? How much is it? A fortune? No, it really isn't any more than just a couple $100 really more than a loaded Le Mans. Well, let's go see one.
The GTO looked like a wide-track Tiger. There were bucket seats, a console, Hurst floor shifter, hood scoops, and red line tires. Plus, you could get all the luxury options, like air conditioning, vinyl upholstery, and a push-button radio, AM of course. Its base sticker price of $2,667 was within reach of a high school or college-age buyer. Here's the kicker. The GTO option to the 64 Le Mans would only set you back another $295.90. All of a sudden, all the other cars at the drive-in were last year's model.
after one of my friends had one and I took it around the block in an aggressive road test. I said, I'm going to have one of these, and I ordered one about 2 days later. Before I even took it home, I snuck down and put Doug's headers on it, had a completely dyno tune, got street slicks on it, and by the time it came home, it was pulling 280 horsepower to the rear wheels.
If the GTO sent a few shock waves through the crowd at the local drive-in, what it did to the street racers was a life-changing experience.
Woodward Avenue was kind of the place where everybody went. It ran right down the middle of Detroit, so you had the people from the west side, people from the east side, and people coming from all over to cruise Woodward Avenue and duke it out a little bit.
There was a fella down the street that had just paid big bucks for a Corvette. Well, I had my GTO and I knew what I could do, and I was looking for him. It took me about 2 months to pin him. Then one night about 11 o'clock, I saw him all alone up there at a stoplight at Huntington Boulevard. He took one look at me, I took one look at him, and we knew we were going to race. And off we went down the road, fishtailing. Probably heard those cars for 6 blocks around. Then when I got by him in third gear, I knew I was going to beat him.
The GTO's promise was incredible performance at a price almost anyone could afford. The key to that promise was the 389 engine. With a cylinder bore of just slightly over 4 inches and a stroke of 3.75 inches, the 389 was already well known to racers, engine builders, and street rodders all over America. This was the engine in the 421 cubic inch Super Duty version, which had owned the NASCAR circuit. At the Bonneville Salt Flats, Mickey Thompson was clocked at over 406 miles per hour, using 4 of these engines in his Challenger 1 world speed record car.
Car flashes through the timing lights. They are recording the fastest time that man has ever crossed the surface of this earth. Mickey Thompson had gone 400...
The 389 going into the GTO was factory rated at 325 horsepower with a single Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetor, or 348 horses with 3 2-barrels. But its real claim to fame was its whopping 428 foot-pounds of torque at a relatively low 4,200 RPM. Equipped with 4-bolt main bearings, the special high-lift camshaft, heavy-duty valve springs, and a few other little doodads courtesy of the boys in Pontiac's engineering department, the 389 was already on its way to becoming a street legend. This was never a very high-revving engine, but from stoplight to stoplight, it was Jack the Bear.
Most of these races were over in a block or two. I mean, very rarely would you get a street where you could rip 100 miles an hour. You'd get on it for maybe a block or two, and you know, if you get the bag on the guy a block, you were the big cheese.
This engine in a lightweight body, the letters GTO gained a new meaning in young America. In Italian, it still meant Gran Turismo Omologato, but in English it spelled, "Buddy, I'm gonna blow your doors off." When GM pulled out of organized racing, it just intensified their presence at the local drag strips across the country. And winning at the drags was key to building the image of the GTO in the hearts and minds of young America.
The year before, I was racing a 1962 Grand Prix at a fairly high level in stock. We were right on the record with that thing in 1380s at about 99 miles an hour. The first time out with this GTO at Fontana Raceway, never having driven it before, driving it out to the track, I went 1385 and 105.38, which was a staggering performance for something you could buy off the showroom floor.
The GTO earned its reputation on the drag strip and on the street, but its reputation was helped along considerably by some of the most innovative image building ever created for an automobile.
I remember an ad that the Uniroyal people did when they showed the tiger paw, and they said, you know, where else would you expect to see tiger paws but on a tiger? One of the things we used to laugh about is that we wanted to burn rubber for an effect in an ad. All we had to do was just get a Uniroyal tiger paw and start burning rubber, and you could burn till infinity. You know, it would never stop until you let off.
The GTO was a great idea, no question. It was a tremendously fun car and quite a competent piece of machinery engineering-wise, certainly by 1964 standards. From a marketing standpoint, the idea was brilliant, this whole factory muscle thing. But if the GTO was going to be a success, it was going to have to shake up the established order of things. Since the GTO first rolled out, Pontiac had been raising a few eyebrows in the motorsports establishment for having the audacity to give an American car, a two-door Tempest no less, the same name as one of the most revered sports cars in the world. And Pontiac was loving every minute of it.
Really, we created the whole concept as a spoof. Let's put a Ferrari GTO in competition with a Pontiac GTO. Now, I knew enough about the two cars to know that we had no business even being on the same road course with them. But if we ever could hook up in a straight line, we'd probably scare them a little bit.
You've got to admit, no one in their right mind would expect a Pontiac to measure up to a Ferrari in any comparison, with the possible exception of rear seat headroom. When the testing was over, though, the little GTO had done pretty well.
In those days, there wasn't an awful lot of real good timing equipment out. The car and driver timed the story with handheld stopwatches. And I'm going to be very honest with you. You don't need me to tell you that this car couldn't run 0 to 100 in 11.8 seconds, falling straight off the top of the Empire State Building. But when I saw it in print, I wasn't going to tell them, hey, guys, I think that's a little too fast.
In that original car and driver test, there were two GTOs present, and both of them were Pontiacs. Car and driver explained that they had wanted to run the two cars together, but they were unable to persuade any of the lucky gentlemen who owned a Ferrari GTO to participate in their little shootout. Undaunted, they proceeded to flog the Pontiacs on the track at Daytona, and the numbers they published were astonishing. The GTO ran 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. It did 0 to 100 in 11.8. It ran the quarter mile in 13.1 seconds at 115 miles per hour. And its handling prompted the editors to state that we found that our Tempest GTO with a 348 horsepower engine to be a better car in many respects and will go around any U.S. road course faster than any Ferrari street machine. Think they were impressed? Well, there are a dozen or so quotes like this in that article which tells us they liked the car. But the one which might sum it up best is this one. Pontiac, God love him, went the hairy-chested route and came up with the best American car we have ever driven, and probably one of the 5 or 6 best cars in the world for the enthusiast driver. That about says it all. Whether you attribute it to being in the right place at the right time or the most brilliant marketing effort in Detroit history, the GTO succeeded fantastically and started Detroit on a binge of horsepower and performance that lasted over a decade. More than anything else, the GTO was a perfect blend of image and substance. It promised the young buyer the ride of a lifetime, and it made good. Today, the GTO is still making good on that promise. GTOs are favorites with car collectors and restorers, and its image as the first muscle car is as strong as ever. Just seeing one on the street brings back a flood of fond memories.
The 64 is such a unique car. It's the first GTO. And it's just, you get a different look in this car. People look at it and they just, it's like they saw a ghost or something. We wanted to build a GTO to not only replicate the car and driver test car, but we wanted to build a GTO that was probably the ultimate GTO for 1964. And we have a 421 engine in this, big car engine. It's date coded to the car, and it has a lot of Super Duty parts internally in the engine. And we created this car to come exactly like the blue car and driver car, which is missing in action now. And some say it was crushed, some say it was burned, some say it still exists. But it's a sister car to the red Royal Bobcat car. And when I saw the pictures of the plate in the magazine, I wanted to get that reproduced, and I did get it reproduced down in Florida. And it's a 1962 Michigan tag, and also I bought from a license plate dealer a 1963 corner tag. And the car is a very well-performing car, very streetable car. And our best time to date is a 1290 at 107 miles an hour. which is quite surprising for a car that looks extremely stock.
The GTO was a car for a person who liked cars and loved to drive a car to its limit. The people in charge at Pontiac Motor Division, the same people who designed and built the cars that swept the NASCAR tracks and took top eliminator at the NHRA drags, wanted to build an exciting car and put it within reach of a whole new generation of car enthusiasts. What they succeeded in doing was to create not just an exciting new car, but a whole new class of automobiles, the muscle cars. All those that came after, the Fairlane GTs, the Coronet RTs, the 442s, the Chevelle Supersports, all owe their lineage to the little GTO. In fact, the GTO set the stage for the great performance revival taking place in Detroit today. The issue is long settled, thanks to Car and Driver and John DeLorean, Jim Wangers, and probably all the midnight street racers through the years, as to whether a car from General Motors has the right to the name Gran Turismo Omologato. Over the 11-year period that Pontiac made the GTO, 1964 through 1974, over 700,000 cars rolled out of Pontiac assembly plants with those three little letters gleaming inside the left grille. That's about 695,000 more GTOs than Ferrari ever made. And that's exactly what Pontiac had in mind. GTO, Gran Turismo Omologato. We know what it means in Italian, but what it really means in English is, get turned on. Thanks for watching, and we hope you'll be with us again on the next issue of the American Muscle Car. Remember, don't crush them, restore them.